Live Unrehearsed on CJAD 800. Brought to you by Marco Vendramini of IG Private Wealth Management. MarcoVendramini.com.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Life Unrehearsed, a show about the ins and outs of family life. So your life isn't going exactly as planned? Well, you're not alone, and we're here to help out. My name is Matt Del Vecchio. I specialize in free retirement home search and senior transition support.
And I'm Corrie, a clinical social worker and psychotherapist specializing in grief and loss.
Coming right up on the first half of today's show, in anticipation of Bell Let's Talk Day on January 30th, we're going to talk with someone who lives with mental illness every day. We have mental health advocate and co-founder of Wise Woman Canada, Liz Wiener, in studio with us. Corrie?
We're very lucky because we have a seasoned radio person who can teach me a lot. Matt, I'm laughing, but I want to stop laughing because there was a terrible story in the news this week and about a woman who froze to death. And from that terrible tragedy, you were all over the news.
Yeah, it was really an unfortunate tragedy. You're talking about Mr. Gilles Ducep's mom.
Yes.
And unfortunately, there was this fire alarm that went off. And at 93 years old, she found herself outside and couldn't get back in. And it really was an unfortunate tragedy is the best way to say it. And so I guess I was honored and privileged for the media to reach out. This is kind of my field,
That's
retirement
right.
residences and senior living, to get my opinion on it. And I did actually a fair amount of research and investigations into it, and it really does come down. So far, we haven't had any results, but it really looks like an unfortunate, tragic situation. If anything, hopefully we'll open up some eyes, and regulations may have to get changed when these things happen, when an alarm goes off, and hopefully make things better for the future. But yeah, so...
well, thank you for educating all of us, and let's hope there's some significant changes that happen.
Yeah, no, thank you. What do we have on the second half?
On the second half of the show, I'm very excited to interview Tariq Rehman. Does anybody struggle with getting out of your comfort zone? Well, Tariq Rehman did. And in 2016, he did an incredible journey, bike around the Camino. And it really was a journey about self-discovery. And he is in studio to share the life lessons he learned along the way.
Yeah, that's going to be so interesting for those who don't know the Camino. It's up in northern Spain, a long, long trek, hundreds of kilometers of pilgrimage that several Montrealers may know about, but it's what he learned about it is so fascinating. So that's coming up after the 4:30 news. All right, as I mentioned, Bell Let's Talk Day coming up on January 30th. There are some incredible stats, Corrie, about mental illness. In fact, in any given year, 1 in 5 people in Canada will personally experience a mental health problem or illness. Taking that one step further, by age 40, it's estimated that about 50% of the population will have or have had a mental illness. And, it's days like Bell Let's Talk Day that get people to talk about it. It really should be 365 days a year.
That's
and
right.
This is why we try to promote this, and why we are very, very pleased to have in studio Liz Wiener. Liz is the co-founder of Wise Woman Canada. She's also the co-chairperson for a very popular event called Mindstrong. It's an event to raise awareness on mental illness, and she is also the mother of 3 lovely children, and husband Lee, who's in studio here also with us, and she lives with depression and anxiety every day, but she is a leading mental health advocate. Liz Wiener, so happy to have you on Life Unrehearsed.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Really, an honor for you to be here. You have been through so much, and for listeners that may not know your story, can you give us a background of your story, please?
Sure. In a nutshell, I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder and depression when I was 24, but I believe that I have struggled my entire life, even as a child. I was diagnosed at a time when it was over 25 years ago. Nobody talked about it. Nobody addressed it. And so I kept that secret for a very, very long time. I was on medication. I was on one of the first SSRI medications. It was very shameful to me because I really perceived it as a weakness of character rather than an illness. I only came out with my story a few years ago on the Wise Woman Canada blog, where I really got tired of harboring this secret, and I published a blog that was my coming out story about living with depression.
I remember reading it and being completely overwhelmed and really, I would say proud or happy for you to find this voice. And I was curious. On top of that, you come out, you share this. How did people around you react? Your family, your friends?
I always tell this story. I hit publish on the blog. I went to a yoga class right away, and an hour later I came out of the yoga class and I already had hundreds of messages from people, comments on the blog saying, "You just told my story," or "I had no idea that you lived like this." So the reaction was amazing in that I think it helped so many people feel less alone.
It's, by the way, while you were in yoga class, I was one of those ones making the comments. Liz, it's one of those things you don't forget, because it is, and maybe if you could just elaborate a little bit more on the story. I mean, you found yourself even hospitalized as to how low it got.
I did. I think something that is misunderstood about mental illness is that it's not a linear recovery, that it is an illness that is chronic, just like diabetes or a thyroid condition that has its ups and downs. About a year and a half ago, I had reached my lowest point. I was having suicidal ideations, and I thankfully reached out to Lisa, who's my partner in Wise Women and best friend, and I reached out to my husband and I said, "I'm in trouble. I need to do something." And I went to the emergency room and was admitted to the psychiatric department of the Jewish General.
Which is, we'll talk about it later in terms of Mindstrong, because I've heard a lot of positive and some challenges around the psychiatric wing of the Jewish General Hospital. I was going to ask you what your biggest challenge to date was. I'm not sure if you've already just covered that.
I don't really think that's my biggest challenge. That certainly was my lowest point, but it was also the point from which I sort of sprungboard into finding different things that would help me. I stopped being complacent about my mental illness. But what I think my biggest challenge to date is self-stigma. It's even when I'm going through a low point, even today, if I'm in a depressive episode, I tend to be hard on myself and say, I can't believe I'm going through this again. That would be my challenge.
We're talking with Liz Wiener, mental health advocate, struggling with anxiety, depression, and mental health every day. Very grateful for you to be on the show, Liz. And you talked about stigma. I think that's still a big issue. You mentioned 20, 25 years ago. Forget about it. Even today, even with many years of Bell Let's Talk and people becoming more comfortable, we're making progress. Have a long, long ways to go. So, in your shoes and being so upfront. Why are there still individuals that have been diagnosed with a mental illness still discouraged from getting out and talking about it?
I think it's what we keep saying, or how I saw myself when I was first diagnosed, is that people really perceive it as a weakness of character. And what I tell people is that it's a disease like anything else, a disease of an organ, and that organ is your brain. And sometimes focusing on that makes it easier to feel less stigma, to appreciate it as a legitimate disease, as a legitimate illness.
So that's Liz Wiener, co-founder of Wise Women Canada, mental health advocate, mother of 3, and someone who struggles with mental illness on a daily basis. Let's talk about language.
All right. Well, one of the words that comes up a lot, actually, when Matt and I were discussing the show, he asked me about the word struggle. Do you struggle with mental illness on a daily basis? And I said, I don't really like using that word because struggle implies victimization. Struggle implies that I'm a victim of my circumstances, and I like to take a more empowered approach. Yes, I have an illness, but I am actively taking care of myself, managing it. It doesn't manage me. So that's my opinion of the word struggle. Something else that we see all the time is people saying commit suicide. Now, the word commit implies a sin or a crime, and so that stigmatizes mental illness as well. So there are little things we can do in our daily lives, being conscious of the language we use, that helps minimize the stigma.
It is, and we find ourselves, Corrie, right, committing these, which we think are normal conversations, I say struggle, and it should more be living with mental illness if we want to get the right terminology. Committed suicide is probably death by suicide is the terminology we're supposed to be using now. So we're all learning. And, I think one of the things, Liz, we talk about people living with mental health issues and mental health illness, but there's a lot more people, the population, that actually know someone that may be living with mental health illness. And that's the group that I want to talk about, because that's almost every one of us knows someone who's living with mental illness. So we're going to head out to traffic, but when we come back, we want to hear the best way we should approach either a family member or a friend that you know is living with mental illness. So let's first head out to the CJD Traffic Center with Lauren Glazer.
Live Fund Rehearsed on CJAD 800. Brought to you by Marco Vendramini of IG Private Wealth Management. MarcoVendramini.com.
Welcome back to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Corrie Sirota with my co-host Matt Del Vecchio, and we are talking with mental health advocate and co-founder of Wise Women Canada, Liz Wiener. She's just so articulate and really on point. Before we went out to traffic, Matt asked the question. In my experience, people tend to be really uncomfortable when they hear about somebody being diagnosed with some type of mental illness. And so we wanted to hear from you, your experience, your advice about what you would say. What's the best way to help a family member or friend who you learn has been diagnosed? How do we approach them?
Right, because Matt, like you said before, 1 in 5 Canadians will be diagnosed or affected by mental illness in their lifetime, and that doesn't count the family, the friends, the employers who are also touched indirectly. So we need some strategies to help us when we are encountered with that kind of situation. So I always say persistence is wonderful, but I don't mean harassment. So if you know a friend is struggling, sending them a text just saying, I'm thinking about you, how are you doing today? But not expecting more and not expecting a return phone call. That's something that I've dealt with, people who call and call and call. And really, when you're in the midst of an episode, a depressive episode or an anxious episode, you may not have the energy to be thinking about returning phone calls. So be patient, but also be persistent in a gentle way. That's one of my best pointers. I also love the idea of just doing things for that person. So whether it's bringing them a meal unsolicited without having to ask for it, offering to do their carpool maybe that day, and also asking them to go out for lunch, to go for a walk, to get them out of the house. Again, it's persistence, but gentle persistence.
It's so interesting to hear because it seems so simple. Right? It seems so simple, and it's not asking much. And I think the important point there is, if you're the person asking, don't be offended if there's not a response right away. Gentle persistence. The message is done. It's out there. And I like that little meal thing, or just helping out with the kids or what have you. So we're talking here with Liz Wiener, mental health advocate, with some wonderful ideas for those that you may know might be living with mental health illness. Now, I'm sure you've got tons of stories, Liz. How about some don'ts? What shouldn't you do? And I'm saying that we're laughing a little bit, but let's face it, even though it's having the conversation, let's talk, Belle, we're having conversations, it's still awkward for many, many people. So what shouldn't we be doing?
I would start with don't look at someone who's gone through an episode, who's going through an episode, and say, well, you look like you're feeling better. That is one of my biggest pet peeves, because the way we present on the outside tells nothing about the way we're feeling on the inside. I hear all the time, well, you don't look like you have mental illness.
Oh, my God.
It's one of the most common comments I get. And so when someone says that to you as the person who's struggling, you feel this pressure, like I have to feel better now, or, well, you think I'm feeling better, so now I can't reach out to you for help if I need it because you think I'm fixed. So that is a big no for me. Don't say you look like you're feeling better. And I know a lot of people who live with mental illness who say the same thing. Don't make comments based on what you see. That is a huge don't. Again, the telling people who struggle with mental illness, who are having a hard time, well, why don't you just go for a walk? Or why don't you get some fresh air? Or maybe you should go to the gym. Or maybe you should just try to smile. That really is demeaning to those of us who struggle, because if it was as simple as going to do a step class at the gym or going for a walk, wouldn't we all be doing that all the time?
Well, it's funny because I could just hear, particularly, even older generations where the attitude, with the type A personality, just suck it up.
Just suck it up.
Deal with it.
Snap out of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. And that's still a very common perception about mental illness, that it's a choice. And that's the message we have to get out there, that it's not a choice. Just like cancer isn't a choice.
So not only is it not a choice, it's not for someone else to define how you are. This is what I'm hearing and what I understand. And so I guess a lot of people try and problem solve for you.
They do. I think that's the natural inclination to say, to look at a friend and say, oh my gosh, you're really struggling. This is what you should do because I want to help you fix this problem. But there is no fix. There's nothing a friend can do to fix, but there are certainly things they can do to help.
This is Liz Wiener, mental health advocate, co-founder of Wise Woman Canada. Before we go, Liz, we absolutely have to talk about this wonderful annual event. You're a co-chairperson of Mindstrong. Tell us about it, please.
So I was just telling Corrie during the traffic that I feel very blessed to be co-chairing Mindstrong this year. It is an initiative of the Jewish General Hospital Foundation and Auxiliary, and the goal of it is to raise funds for the Jewish General Hospital Psychiatry Department infrastructure, and we could talk about that, what it is currently like, and also for mental health services. So we know that mental health is the most underfunded sector in our healthcare system, and so we really rely on private fundraising in order to make those services accessible to the population.
So tell us a little bit more about it. So it's a one-time event once a year, and how can people donate? How does it work?
It is a fitness event. It takes place, it's the first Sunday of May. It's a full day of fitness, of fun, of entertainment, of food. And it is an incredible environment that's designed to not only raise funds, but really to raise awareness about the cause. It takes place on Sunday, May 5th. It always hosted very graciously by Midtown Sanctuary. And it's an amazing day. Participants need to raise money in order to enjoy the day, but it's such an important cause. Like we said before, I experienced hospitalization in the psychiatric ward of the Jewish General Hospital. It has not been touched since the 1950s. That is not an environment conducive to healing.
All right, so contribute to Mindstrong. Just have to look it up, right?
jghmindstrong.com, as in Jewish General Hospital, mindstrong.com. We would love to have people involved, to sponsor us, to help us spread the word.
I think we're going to put it on our Facebook page as well. So if people are interested and want to know, they'll have that, make it easy for them as well.
Liz Wiener, thank you so much for being on Life Unrehearsed, a real breath of fresh air for such a serious disease.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Liz. Always enlightening, where people go onto our Facebook page and find out more about it. Thanks again. So, coming right up after the news, want to break out of your comfort zone and create a life that is fulfilling and purposeful? Stay with us as author of The Camino Within, Tariq Rehman tells us how.